Welcome back here to Wake Up Call with Dan Tortora, where sports truly meets that thing called life. We are inside of the Great Lakes Honda City studios. Great Lakes Honda City with new and used vehicles of all different shapes and sizes for whatever you need and your family needs. Find out more about their inventory at greatlakeshondacity.com and go and visit them Monday through Saturday. Let them know the DT sent you their way. So, with that being said, we are here picture in picture with my friend Randy Edsall, somebody that I respected as a coach, continue to respect as a coach, even though he's out there golfing and getting a tan and living his best life right now. I am typically dark brown, but because of where I am right now, I am lighter. And so Randy is getting the tan for the both of us currently. And just to give a little background here, Randy, got to know who Randy was, obviously historically with Syracuse, my hometown, Rob Drummond being one of my closest friends, a brother to me. And obviously Randy was at UConn, then went over to Maryland, went back to UConn. We crossed paths, and I finally got to tell him to his face the respect that I have for him and my desire to build a relationship. But relationships don't get built by one person, they get built by two people. And Randy obliged me and allowed me the opportunity to kind of live in his world a little bit. So before anything else, Randy, I want to say that my hope years ago was that you and I could build a friendship as well as a professional relationship. And without you, that doesn't happen. So I want to say thank you for giving me a chance to show you that I was different from the rest. And I really do value the bond that we have.
Well, my pleasure, and I appreciate the friendship and the relationship, and you're doing a lot of good stuff, a lot of good work.
Well, I appreciate that very much. So, when I took the picture with you when you came to the Dome, because obviously your son Corey is there with Stanford this past season, and so you had Stanford on and whatnot. And when I took that picture with you, I'm like, I'm waiting for those comments. Is he coming back? What's he gonna do? And it's like, no, he's just supporting. He's having a good time and enjoying the time there. And by the way, first time Stanford and Syracuse had played each other. And congratulations to your son. Syracuse didn't lose a lot of games this past season under Fran Brown, but one of those games was to Stanford, and your son a part of that staff. So I know that you got to enjoy that game for your son. You got to enjoy that game coming back to Syracuse. So what was it like being in your seat, having a tie to both of the schools?
Well, it was nice to be back in Syracuse, and I got a chance to see some people that I hadn't seen in a while, and catch up a little bit. But you're there, blood's thicker than water, and when it's family. And I was rooting for Stanford, and because again, that's where my son is now coaching, and it was a tremendous game, and Stanford did enough to pull it out there at the end with the field goal, and Syracuse went on and had a great year and had a great run, and so it was good. But I just kind of sit there and just watch the game and just see how things unfold, and don't really get too involved during the game. I just try to sit there and watch it as a parent and as a spectator, and understanding that what goes into all the decisions that are going to be made and everything else. So I just kind of sit there and just try to enjoy it. And I'm just glad I'm on that side of it than being down on the sideline anymore.
Yeah. And I mean, and you and I were talking off the air about this. We had a conversation within the last few years here, and the discussion of how, when I said to you, you got out at a time where, I thought you were going to continue coaching, and you had decided to exit and to leave. I understood the reasoning from my point of view, because from my seat, your second trip to UConn, they're in the American Athletic Conference. The team was winning 1 to 3 games a year at best. And so when you took over, it was like having to rebuild something that you had already built and have to do it all over again. Then they left the American for the Big East, left football out to pasture, and really didn't give you any help. And now you got to make your own schedule. You're an independent team. You don't have the help of a conference. You don't have the money of a conference. And when you left, like I said, for those reasons, it made a lot of sense to me, because I feel like they put you in a no-win situation. And then we started talking about what was on the horizon. We talked about NIL. We talked about the transfer portal. And you had spoken to me about seeing these things so far away. And I go back to that conversation, and whenever I think of horizon when it is to this collegiate athletic stuff, I think about you first because you had the wherewithal to just sense it. What was it about what was happening when you were coaching that kind of led you to seeing things, in my opinion, maybe a little bit faster, in a lot of cases, definitely a little bit faster, a lot of bit faster than other people were seeing? It just seemed like you had the mental fortitude to kind of Nostradamus some of this stuff where other people were like, let's see what happens. And you're like, no, 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 no. I know what's going to happen. How did you know? How did you read the tea leaves?
Well, having been involved as a player and then as a coach and for so many years, um, you pay attention and you observe and you watch and you're sitting involved in it. You're sitting in meetings and you see things that are happening. And when you see how things have changed over the years, and they've really never done anything to take care of the student athletes, because it still was student athlete at the time. And people in the positions of making decisions didn't have the foresight and didn't want to recognize the issues that were happening. And I just go back and take a look at it as over the years, from the time that I started playing, and then as a young assistant, and then as a coordinator at Georgia Tech, and then as a head coach, for 22 years. It's people didn't want to understand that we've added, games to the schedule. Kids weren't home for Thanksgiving anymore. They weren't home in the summertime. You had them there, and basically, nothing changed. It was just room, board, books, tuition, and fees, and you were asking more and more from the player, mm-hmm. and the universities and the athletic departments were making all this money, and I just saw it happening. That one way that you could alleviate the issue, and I said this probably 4 to 5 years, basically, I think even maybe before I left, I was maybe at Maryland, I started talking about we should give the players a stipend because of those things that we're doing. We went from 10 games to 11 games to 12 games. And then, you went to conference championships, and then you end up eventually getting into a college football playoff.
Yeah.
But now there were more demands. Kids couldn't really work in the summertime because they were on campus and all that. You had them in school. And so give them a $10,000 to $20,000 stipend so they could end up enjoying college. And if you did that, and if you took care of that issue, you might not have some of the issues that you have, today. So it was just, it's kind of like a common sense approach,
Yeah.
And that's all it was. I mean, here were the demands, but you weren't doing anything to help the student athlete, meet those demands and combat those demands on their schedules and things. So I just, like I said, to me, it was just common sense, and it wasn't that hard.
Yeah, we've had so multi-layered discussions many times about this. If you would allow me to kind of roll with this for a second, because obviously your last stint was a second stint at UConn, can they survive this? Can they win? I mean, we saw them go back to the Big East, obviously, for basketball, and it looks like getting the band back together. The only teams that aren't in the Big East for basketball anymore that were in the Big East are the Louisvilles and the Syracuse and Pitt and Notre Dame, but everybody else is there. Now that this team has kind of been left to pasture, New Mexico State has found a conference. UMass is going to be joining the MAC. There's only 2 independent schools. One of them just played for a national championship in Notre Dame and has just a world difference in UConn. And then there's UConn. So, I mean, can this survive, or or is this UConn needs a home? They have to find a place. They need to get into any conference that's willing to take them. I mean, we had 7 to 9 independent schools in a not too distant past. Now we have 2. Notre Dame has proven that they're going to be in the conversation. They're going to be effective under Marcus Freeman. We've obviously seen, but UConn, they go to bowl games. But I mean, what happens now if Notre Dame is this island on its own, and then the only other independent is UConn? Does UConn have to forge its way into a conference and then risk leaving the Big East, or somehow try to stay in the Big East and then put their football somewhere else?
Well, I think what UConn is doing, basically, it was all about basketball. And when I went back the second time, and that's why they made the decision to go into the Big East, because they didn't think the American was going to do that. And obviously it paid off. They have 2 national championships in men's basketball. And of course, Gino, as long as Gino's there, they'll be competitive and have the opportunity to compete for national championships. When he leaves, I don't know what will happen.
Yeah.
But what's happening there is it's a little bit of a situation. Is they went to the Big East, and I'm sure there's a pretty big buyout if they leave the Big East to try to go to another conference. And I have heard that they were offered to go into the American and the MAC as football only, and they decided not to do that. And they leveraged the basketball team with Fox to get a little bit more money from a standpoint of a TV deal. But in essence, until you get into a conference in football, it's not going to work. I mean, congratulations to them. They went to a bowl game this year. But when you take a look at the schedule you're playing, I think one team had a winning record. The schedule you're going to be playing, they were supposed to play Ohio State this coming year, and because that was scheduled when I was there, they dropped that game because they didn't want to play a tough, game like that, and like they did against Tennessee a couple of years ago and got blown out.
Yeah.
And so, the schedule is such. When you look at the schedule is we had tougher schedules when we made the transition from 1AA to 1A. So it's almost like they're just trying to have the easiest schedule possible, win games, and then they can say they've gone to a bowl game. But until you get into a conference, you're not relevant, and with the way things are going in terms of the Power Four and everything else. And so they're going to have to find a conference where they're going to go in with everything, have to pay a buyout to the Big East, and then try to ramp their program up. But again, is anybody going to expand here moving forward? That's the $1 million question in terms of where we're at right now. And I mean, they're not going to get to the Big Ten or the SEC, that's for sure. They tried to get to the Big 12, and the Big 12 didn't want them. And so you have the ACC, but nothing looks to happen with, Florida State and Clemson and North Carolina. So, you're sitting there just with what you have, and very difficult to, be relevant in football in that situation.
I mean, honestly, and I appreciate the background on it because you lived it, it seems like the only conference that could really be in a place where they need right now because of the poaching from the Pac is the Mountain West. But in that situation, UConn is totally out of water there and going to be playing games across the country. Doesn't make any logical or rational sense.
They're not going to do any, in my opinion. And I don't talk to anybody there, but in my opinion, they're not going to do anything that isn't going to enhance the basketball program. They're not going to go because, again, if they wanted to go football only, they had the opportunity to do that with the American Conference or the MAC. And so I know that for a fact, that they had that opportunity, but they turned that down. So you're not going to go to the Mountain West for football only. And unless they're going to get into a Power Four conference with everything, like I said, they're going to stay independent in football until, if a invite comes from a Power Four conference, they'll leave. If they don't, then they'll stay status quo in the Big East and independent in football.
It almost seems like this knee-jerk reaction may end up costing them a lot of money because football is left out on its own, and returning to the Big East obviously, gives them notoriety, it gives them history. The Big East Conference is fantastic for basketball and they lean into basketball, but it also seems like if they want to bring everything into one place, this is going to end up, in the grand scheme of things, costing them a lot of money along the process of really not having a plan for football. When you say the MAC, and for a fact UConn was the MAC asked them to join, the American asked them to join. When Mike Oresco was the commissioner of the American, and they said, we're leaving, but we'll leave football here, Mike said, if you're taking it, you take it all. There's no way you're keeping football here. So when you say, and I'm paraphrasing, but he was pretty clear about, if UConn's gone, and said to me, if you're going, you're not leaving football. So when you say the American invited them for football only and they said no, is that a more recent Tim Pernetti new leadership thing?
That's probably been within the last year. And
Okay.
that's, they had a change in commissioners. Oresco is not the commissioner. Tim Pernetti's
Right.
the commissioner now. So they've had opportunities to go in places for football only within probably the last year, but that hasn't taken place. So, it all stems back, to UConn from the standpoint when after Lou Perkins left and went to Kansas, they were always so concerned, and we had a good run going in terms of football and what was starting to happen, and they just weren't proactive when all this stuff started to happen, and with realignment and all those things where BC and Syracuse, those people got out in front of it, and UConn just stayed there because they the land of steady habits. The Big East was fine, but now, so they never were proactive. They could have been where BC, Syracuse, Pitt, those schools are at in the ACC, but they sat there under the leadership that was there at that time. And when I was there, they just sat there and just didn't do anything.
Yeah, and this realignment and what it's caused, like we talk about, you talk about the Power Four, the Autonomous Four. PAC's no longer an autonomy conference. They're trying to put themselves back together. Honestly, I think they should take the PAC name away and just call it blank state, because in order to get into the PAC, you have to have state at the end of your name. There's all Oregon State, Washington State, Boise State, San Diego State. And so as this is kind of coming back together, you see that the logo that I chose to put up here with my logo is the college football playoff, because the NCAA under Mark Emmert, their former president, made clear when he said during COVID, I have no control over college football. I
No,
can't tell a conference, I can't tell a school I can't tell them to play, I can't tell them not to play. And then the first thing that I thought of when he said that was, well, then you're the president of nothing and you shouldn't take a paycheck. The second thing that I thought was, if you can't tell a conference what to do, then you can't tell a school what to do. And then you state that you can't tell a school what to do. So if I'm a student athlete or I'm a coach and you suspend me or you try to kick me off a team or whatever you do to me, I'm not going to listen. I'm going to play. I'm not going to pay a fine, because if you can't control my institution and you can't control the conference that my institution is within, then how are you controlling me? And so that kind of threw me off. But now we're in a place, Randy, where if the College Football Playoff Committee, and this is what's really controls college football, and NCAA has no control over college football other than slapping their logo on it, then do we need a commissioner of college football? And then off of, do we need a commissioner, which I'd love to hear your thoughts, off of that, do we do what I talked to you about before? Do we break up the FBS, leave the FCS alone, but do we take the SEC, Big Ten, Notre Dame, and see Clemson, Florida State, if some of those can get out and want to go with the SEC, do we do what I said before, which I saw happening 5-6 years ago, that the SEC would leave, the Big Ten will leave with them, which is why they took the West Coast schools in order to have the entire country called for, so to speak, in major market teams, or major brand teams, I should say. They're not all in major markets, but major brand teams. do we need a commissioner? And if that happens, then do we see the SEC, Big Ten, Notre Dame form Tier 1, the rest of the FBS is Tier 2, and then the FCS is essentially Division 1 AAA as opposed to Division 1 AA?
Well, I think the problem you have, Dan, is between the two. I mean, basically the Big Ten and the SEC, they're running college football right now.
Right.
The Big 12 and the ACC, they're basically they're in the room, but they basically have no say, in my opinion. And it's just hard for me to believe that Greg Sankey or who I don't even know who the commissioner is of the Big Ten right now, but who's going to give up that power, that they have, that if you're going to mix those going into one, which one of those guys is going to do that? And then if you bring somebody in from the outside, has a commissioner, well, they're going to still say that they have, the say over what they want to do with their conferences and all those sort of things. So I think that's a long way away from where things could go. I think there's a couple scenarios that you could have. Is you could take those 4 conferences that you have right now and everybody expand to where they get to 20 teams, and have 4 5-team divisions within those conferences. Then each team in the division plays each other home and away for 6 games. They play one team from each of the other, or from another conference. They play 2 games from there, and then their last 2 games they take it from one team from each of those conferences, where you have 12, and then whoever wins those divisions within the conference plays in the semifinals for the conference championship, and then the other 2 for the championship, and then one person from each of those 4 conferences goes to the national semifinals and the final, and you have 16 games. So you could do that, or if you didn't want 80 teams involved, now people cut back and get rid of some teams and have 16 teams and have 4-team divisions and do that, because I just don't think you're going to get to a situation where you're going to take just the SEC and the Big Ten and, they're the NFL, and the Big 12 and the Big 12 and the ACC or the AFL or whatever, and then do that. I just, and have a different tier for those. I just don't see that. But because I think there's just so many things that you have when you're dealing with all that. And then, from a TV standpoint, you have some issues. So, I think having a commissioner would be good.
Yeah.
Over all that stuff, but I just don't see it. I don't see it happening.
Well, and you made mention of, if you want to have less than 80, a conversation that was brought up, kind of a model that was brought up by Gary Stoken, President and CEO of Peach Bowl, Inc., that oversees the Chick-fil-A Peach Bowl, which is within the College Football Playoff, oversaw and helped bring the College Football Hall of Fame to Atlanta, Georgia, and also has the Aflac kickoff game, and just was, Mercedes-Benz Stadium, where we have all of these games under Peach Bowl, Inc. Mercedes-Benz Stadium just had the national championship. He spoke with me about 64, that's the magic number. Now, if you had 4 conferences of 16 teams, then that gives you 64. And so if you have 4 conferences of 16 teams, and then you break up if you want to break up within your conference into, groups, if you have 4 in each, then that can make up your 16. He spoke with me about 64. You're going to have 8 divisions with 8 in it. And now you've gotten rid of conferences. Now you're calling this new thing. You got 64, whatever you're going to call it. You got a commissioner. But the question I had to him was, nobody's going to want to give up their conference name. Nobody's going to want to give up their logo, their trademark, who they are, why they are. The ACC functions differently than other conferences. They handle themselves differently. So I've been inside of that. I've been inside of the American to see how they handle themselves. I've done work in coverage of the SEC, the Big Ten, and so on and so forth. So if we had the 64, an issue that I see with taking the 64 and doing away with conferences is now what happens to your commissioners, what happens to your staffing, what happens to the protection of that if we make divisions by region. So if we were to go to 64 and there was a commissioner and he or she had a board of directors that helped them figure this thing out from year to year, how can we have 64 have divisions and then still keep conferences? Because that was the one thing with Gary when I was breaking it down with him is you're going to have to keep the identity of a conference. So if you have 64 and let's say you take them from those 4 conferences, so each has 16, then how do you kind of put that together? I mean, do you just have 16 in each and keep the Big 12, Big 10, SEC, ACC names and then call this overarching thing a different name than NCAA? So conferences stay themselves. There's 16 in each conference. It's the Big 12, the Big 10, the SEC, the ACC. So the names are the same, the trademarks are the same, the logos are the same, but we have 16 in each of these. There's 4. They play under this new named whatever with a commissioner of whatever this is going to be called. And then within their conference, they divide up into almost like a mini NFL. I mean, is that a way to do it?
Well, the thing is, college football isn't college football anymore.
True.
In my opinion. College football is the NFL. So you might as well just take the NFL model and put it in place, because everything that we're doing, everything college football is doing now is replicating the NFL. So put it together from the standpoint of, divisions and all that. Because the thing that I don't like going into 8 teams and all that stuff, because now you play 7. You only play, the team in terms of finding the real, I think it's better when you have 5 teams or 4 teams in a division, and you play each other home and away. So you find out, and then you make the playoffs, and then it's more equitable in terms of who comes out instead of how they do it now. I mean, you're in these conferences, and the schedule is such that it's unfair, in terms of who plays who and all those things. And it just, and the other thing is too, I mean, if you're going to basically you have to take football and eliminate it from everything. So you're still going to need, conference commissioners, for all those conferences, because all you're doing is taking football and moving it over here. But you know what? And then what happens is those commissioners aren't going to make as much, and all those sort of things. And so it's one of those situations where it's God bless whoever can figure this whole thing out. But the thing is college football is worse than the NFL because there's no rules and regulations to how much you can pay somebody, how long somebody is with you. It's free agency every day, and there's no salary cap. And until you get all those things worked out, it doesn't matter. In my opinion, it doesn't matter what you do, because you're just going to have ingredients thrown into a bowl and nothing mixed up. It's just going to look like a pile of crap.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like mixing tuna and peanut butter. You might like them both separately, but together it doesn't make sense. Are we kidding ourselves, Randy, that, with the NIL and with the transfer portal, and I call it no fence around the barn, so every night you got to look for the horses. I wrote an article about this, and that's how I ended the article. Are we essentially kidding ourselves that any of this is making any sense? Because we talk about, like you said, it's like the NFL, but it's not like the NFL in the sense that the NFL has free agency. There's a plan. There's only a certain time where you can sign a free agent. Then you have to be part of a team. You have to abide by your contract unless your team decides to negotiate that contract. You can't just up and leave. You can't declare yourself, I'm not a part of the team anymore. You can't just, in the middle of the season, Trevor Lawrence can't say, well, I got 9 more years with the Jaguars, but I just made the decision that I want to be a Cowboy, so I'm going to sit out in week 4, and then I'm going to go down to Dallas and hang out with them and start playing in a couple weeks. Knowing that NIL has little to no parameters, every bit of tampering that you can imagine and probably beyond what you can imagine, the fact that they thought that they could have a portal and NIL function separately and not have people that are on one staff calling your players and telling your players to get in the portal because they'll give you more money than what you're giving them. I mean, there's that element of it where the money has no ceiling and there's no parameters and there's no tampering anything and nobody's getting in trouble as of right now. There's the portal, which provides free agency that's more disastrous than any other professional league because there's a fence around it. And on top of all of this, we're trying to figure out who, if the Big Ten and the SEC are running the show, why are the Big 12 and the ACC called power? Why are they in the autonomy group? Like you said, they're sitting at the table, but are they even allowed to speak? What happens to the Mountain West, to Conference USA, to the Sun Belt, to the MAC, to the American Athletic Conference? What happens to all the rest of FBS football? Are we essentially right now just kind of holding these things together by silly string and essentially kidding ourselves that there's a system, there's a method? Because as you and I break this down, it sounds like there's a lot of things that exist, but there's no umbrella, there's no connection, and it kind of just feels like instead of having a car on the road, we have an engine, we have a transmission, we have wheels, we have a frame, but nobody's put it together.
Yeah, it to me, it's a situation where you have a lot of different entities who are in charge, but there's no one person, there's no one thing, no one person in charge or no one group that's in charge. And until you figure out the portal and you figure out the NIL, all the other stuff to me doesn't even matter, in terms of a playoff and everything else, because until you can get it to where kids have to sign a contract,
yeah,
and be held responsible to stay there, for 2 years or whatever it may be, or, in terms of there's got to be an X number of dollars that a school can spend, on their football team and can't go any further than that. And then if a kid leaves, you shouldn't be able to replace that money for, if a kid comes in and leaves at mid-year, you shouldn't be able to replace that money until the following year. I mean, that's why I said, you have, they want to be like the NFL, but they don't have the rules, where the NFL has the rules. They have the salary cap. They have all these things, you just can't, they sign contracts, and to me, you should just have where you have, whether it's right now, the Power 4 conferences, they should have their own playoff. Then the other group of 5, should have their own playoff. And then you have FCS, Division 2 and Division 3 is what you should do. And go and start working those things because, and then one of the things that really, okay, yeah, coaches could leave after being there. But you know what? Coaches had buyouts in their contract. I left UConn and went to Maryland. I had to pay, $1 million, or I don't know if it was $1 million. It was close to, it was a lot of money that I had to pay to UConn to go.
Yeah.
Well, kids don't have that now. You can just go to school, and you take a look. I mean, when kids in college are getting more money, when like the quarter, Spencer Bennett, I think it is, from Georgia, he doesn't come back to Georgia. He goes one more year to Miami and he's hurt and is going to make like $4 million, for 6 months or whatever it is, from going down there.
Yeah.
And well, I don't blame the kid for doing it because that's more money than he would make in his whole rookie contract,
Yeah.
coming out into the NFL. So there's just so many variables that before you start getting into what do you do with the playoff, you better take care of the NIL and the portal situation and come up with some rules and regulations because it's just not sustainable in terms of how it's set up right now. And I just, if you're not, even if you are a Power Four team, I mean, just if you're a Group of Five team and you recruit kids and you develop them, that kid's, somebody's going to be in his ear. He's going to be leaving you, and after you've done all the work, and it's or if you're a bottom level Power Four school, you take these kids and you develop them. I mean, look at Notre Dame. I mean, the last 2 years between Duke and Wake Forest, they brought their quarterbacks, in from those places. And, it just, there's got to be something done where kids sign something and there's a penalty for them when they leave, whether they have to pay a buyout or they have to sit or do something, because it's just not, it's not sustainable the way it is. I mean, if that's what you want, so be it. But that's one of the reasons why I got out of it. And that's why you're seeing, Nick Saban, football coaches, and even basketball coaches, they're all tired of it, especially the guys who've been in it, because, it's no longer, Dan, to me, about developing the young man. It's developing him as a person, as a student, and as a player. It isn't about that anymore. It's just all about how much money, we can spend when Ohio, and the worst thing that happened is Ohio State winning the national championship. They spent $20 million on NIL. And so now everybody thinks, okay, we got to spend $20 million to go win a national championship.
Yeah. And I was thinking about that, and obviously you bringing that up means something to me here when you did this, and you just stated that, because I'm looking at the numbers here right now and breaking it down to take a look. The nation's top 25 college football programs with the best NIL situations, according to estimated NCAA data. 25 at number 25, the Illinois Fighting Illini, valued at $9.3 million in when it comes to NIL. 24, Washington Huskies 9.4, 23, Louisville Cardinals 9.44, then South Carolina with 9.5, then the Iowa Hawkeyes with 9.6. Just going down the line, Florida State Seminoles, they're valued at 20 overall here in this top 25, $10 million. Oregon is 19 with 10.6, Kentucky 11.2, Arkansas 11.5 in valuations. Then we have Auburn at 16 with 11.58, Tennessee with 11.6, Virginia at 14 with 12.7, Michigan State at 13, the Hoosiers of Indiana at 12 with 13.6, Penn State valuing them with $13.7 million. And then we have Oklahoma 10 with 14.8, Clemson at 9 with 15.2, Florida Gators 15.8, and then from there we have Alabama at 15.9 currently, Michigan Wolverines $16.3 million. Then the top five: Texas A&M 17.2, Georgia 18.3 at 4, LSU at 3 with $20.1 million. Then we have Ohio State with 20.2, and number one, the Texas Longhorns, $22.2 million. And keep in mind, NIL money spent on Quinn Ewers and Arch Manning when they're both a quarterback and only one of them can be on the field at any given time, and Arch Manning having more valuation than we saw the guy who was starting ahead of him in Quinn Ewers. So, I mean, we're talking about this crazy, insane money. I mean, I just gave you the top 25 from this study here from NCAA data, and looking at the 25th of the top 25 was almost $10 million. I mean, if you have $10 million to just float around however you want to from year to year just with football alone, I mean, we're talking essentially, I mean, it's like the Yankees. Can you just buy a team? Can you buy the right team? And I mean, Randy, the question I ask you as a longtime coach, like you said, over 20 years of being a head coach, I talk to coaches and ADs all throughout the year. And I have been told by more than one of them that they know that other schools are calling their players and talking to their players, texting them, calling them, and giving them money, saying, hey, this is the amount of money. If you get in, you're not in the portal. I'm not supposed to be able to talk to you, but I'm going to call you right now. If you get in the portal, this is what's going to be waiting for you in the portal if you come to me. I had coaches tell me during the college football playoff, during this 12-team playoff, while they were practicing for a game at the end of the week, that they were dealing with the fact that schools were calling their players while they were in game prep for a college football playoff game. If you were coaching right now and you were in the college football playoff and you found out that 3 or 4 coaches in the country were calling your players on Wednesday and you got a game on Saturday in the middle of the CFP, how are you going to react?
Well, what are you going to do? What can you do? I mean, that's the world we live in, Dan. That's the problem, and really there's so much abuse that's taken place. And see, here's the thing, growing up in the sport and everything else. And, the SEC's been known to cheat for a long, long time, and cheating wasn't legal when I was first starting coaching and all that stuff. People were doing things. Well, now cheating is legal. And here's the other thing. Let's stop calling it name, image, and likeness. It's a pay-for-play scheme that's taken place, because don't tell me that the kids are doing all these things supposedly, I got to maybe send a tweet out here or a tweet out there, and I'm getting $1 million for that. So it's a farce. It's a fraud in terms of what they're saying. It's a pay-for-play scheme that is taking place. Okay. And so, and you're going to have people, because people know that nobody's going to do anything to them by calling a kid and telling him, because, it's just like they'll go back door. They'll go to the coach. They'll go high school coach. They'll go to a parent some way, somehow, and here's the thing. It's not even coaches that are involved with, the schools aren't even involved with the name, image, and likeness. It's these collectives that are set up, and the coaches will give the people these numbers and say, hey, here's the guys that we want. And it's not even in some instances, I'm sure it's not coaches even making the phone call, so it's a bad situation, that's taken place. And now they've let and okay, so what's going to happen now with this lawsuit that's down there? And if you have to commit $20 million to, for the schools to pay, how are people going to divide that money up? It all going to football? How much is going to basketball? How much to women's basketball? All on down the line. And now the other thing is, with what's taken place, you have so many more scholarships that are going to be given, to people. Where are these universities going to come up with this money, for scholarships, for doling out this money? And I just read today, I saw where Penn State, I was reading my hometown paper, the York Daily Record. Well, Penn State's, they're raising their season ticket prices. They're raising their prices on their parking passes. They're raising on the concessions. They're raising money to what it's going to cost to play golf on the blue and white course there. So now it's the fans who have to absorb all this. In the state of Pennsylvania, I mean, they're going to spend $700 million to renovate Beaver Stadium. There's a lot of people in Pennsylvania aren't going to be able to go to those games because they're going to be priced out with all the prices that are going to be happening. So and where does this all stop? With TV and everything else, because there's a lot of people that don't watch NBA basketball anymore, and I think with some of these things that are going on, people are starting to get fed up with this stuff with college football, and how many people are going to continue to watch games, and where's the TV people going to continue to come up with all this kind of money?
Well, and you just said something, and I was thinking of a different angle, but you brought up a great point, and I witnessed this when I was in college, and I was making a little bit of money on the side, and I was at a D3 school. I got recruited to play basketball D3. I'm a good shooter. I'm 5'8". So I got recruited to play D3 basketball. I came off a bad coach in high school. I told the coach at Marywood University, maybe not this year, I'll take some time. So I ended up broadcasting instead, started my career instead, and I was working at a movie theater. And working at the movie theater, DHL would drop off the reels. Well, the price of gas went up. So then the price of reels went up. So then when they dropped off the reels to our movie theater, the price of tickets went up. Because whenever a business raises a price to another business, it eventually comes to the consumer because the business wants to make the same bottom line. Hey, if it's going to cost me $10 to bring a reel in, and now it's going to cost me $15, well, now I'm going to jack up my prices $5 so that I make the same amount in my business. And you just brought up that model as where we are right now. The cost of having a college football team at your school, the cost of having a professional team at your college has gone up. So we are now charging the consumer. But here's my other angle, because I'm from Syracuse, New York, and Syracuse University, which I think is a complete farce and sham to say this, claims poverty a lot of times. And when they wanted to renovate the stadium, it was like, well, how are you going to help us? Well, can you give to the university? And I looked around the people in my community and said, they don't need our help. They don't need our money. They charge for their ticket prices. And let's just say one thing for argument's sake, just for my hometown. Take Syracuse, take every game out of it, every piece of merchandise, every soda, every beer, every bit of food. If they're charging $80,000 for tuition, I figured out by the numbers a few years ago, they're making over $2 billion a year on undergrads coming in if they never played a game, never sold a ticket, never sold a jersey, never sold soda, never sold beer, never sold food. So this whole poverty, plus these universities, they have endowments and they have all this other stuff. They have money that's going to sit there forever that no one's going to use. So the question becomes, Randy, if the schools are making a decision to pay for play, which I agree with you, that they're doing that because Tennessee is raising their prices and they're calling it a talent fee. So if this is what's happening and it's going to affect the consumer, the fan, what's stopping a college or a university from jacking up the price of admission to their students that are not athletes and forcing those students that sit in the same classrooms as the student athletes to cover the cost to pay those athletes?
Oh yeah, no, it's a bad business model. That's the thing. It's a bad business model because, look how much money. There's not very many schools in the country that are making money in their athletic departments.
Yeah.
And in football. And this is the other thing. When I was at Syracuse, we had 8 full-time coaches. We had 2, when I first started as a GA, we had 2 part-time coaches and 1 graduate assistant and a head coach. That's all we had. That was 1980, 1979, or 1980. And so nowadays, you take a look, college teams have more people employed from a personnel standpoint, from coaches to personnel people to recruiting people and all these things than the NFL does. It just blows my mind how many people that these schools employ. And it's like, you don't need that many people. That's the thing that just blows my mind, and it's like, but obviously there's nobody that it's kind of like the government. They're just spending all this money, but they can't account for it. They can count for it, but their revenues aren't, projected what they have. At Connecticut, the state has to fund the state schools. The states have to fund, the schools basically, yeah, and give them money. Private institutions are different, but it just, I don't know. It just, they don't have a very good business model. I'll say that.
No, and the thing you kind of going over and what you just said about the staffs at for college football teams, the head coach has assistants and the assistants have assistants.
Yeah.
And then the assistant of the assistant has a quality control. So
Yep.
I mean, there's layers upon layers of staffing here, and everything that kind of go. So you got to take care of all those people, and then you got to take care of your players. Then you got, I mean, then you got to somehow, some way take care of the fans. But where the fans are getting frustrated and the fans are getting upset, to go over your point, something you had said earlier here on Wake Up Call with Dan Tortora inside of the Great Lakes Honda City Studios, is Randy, you made the statement of people are getting tired up, they're getting fed up. I'm going to talk about why I think a fan is getting fed up. I grew up a Jaguars fan, been a Jaguars fan since they came out in 1995. I bought a Blake Bortles jersey, a Leonard Fournette jersey, and a Jalen Ramsey jersey. All different colors, same jersey, different colors. None of those guys are on the team anymore. So I haven't bought a jersey for the Jacksonville Jaguars in a long time, not even a Trevor Lawrence jersey, because I have no faith that somebody's going to actually live by their contract. And I wouldn't be surprised if 3-4 years from now, Trevor Lawrence is gone. He's off playing for the Chargers, and they're trying to figure that out. So if that's what college has become, and now we're so excited, right? We're so happy that we can finally put a name on the back of the jersey. Oh my gosh, what if Syracuse could put McNabb on the back of the jersey? What if they could put, if they could put a bunch of different names? What if they put Marvin Graves on the back of the jersey, Marvin Harrison on the back of the jersey? What if they could do Sean Tucker within the last couple of years, or Kyle McCord? Now that we can actually do these things, but now that it's more like the NFL, are fans going to get frustrated because, well, this year Arch Manning's my quarterback at Texas, but next year he's at Ohio State, and then the year after that he's at Michigan, and then the year after that he's at Notre Dame? I mean, are fans that are already being constrained by the fact that their groceries have gone up, their gas has gone up, the price of their cars gone up, their electricity and lighting has gone up, everything that they have has gone up. They got rid of cable, but now YouTube TV and Fubo TV cost as much or more than the cable that they gave up. And now you're going to raise their ticket prices by $5, $10, $15, $20. Is a fan going to want to buy a jersey now when their glory quarterback, their world-renowned running back, and this top-flight linebacker is going to play for them this year and then play for 3 other teams before he goes to the NFL?
And I think it's going to be tough. There's only so much that can go around. And, it's just, speaking of Jacksonville down here, I mean, they might have the worst owner in all of the NFL. I mean, to me, they have no clue as to what they're doing, down here.
Agreed.
But, there's just loyalty doesn't mean anything anymore. Yeah. Basically, and again, it's a pay for play scheme. I mean, you take a kid coming out of high school. In the NFL, you come out of college, you go to the NFL, there's parameters in terms of how much money guys can make and all those sort of things.
Yeah.
High school kids haven't proven anything on the college level, and some of them are getting over $1 million, come from high school, and there's even I'm sure in some situations there's people who are finding out who the really good players are, and through these collectives they got some people from certain college teams, I'm sure, who are doing NIL deals with high school kids so they can then try to entice them to come to the college that they're representing. So it's just an utter mess. And like I said, I don't see any, and the NCAA, they have no power, not for college football, anything with college football now, and they're so afraid of the lawsuits and everything else. I firmly believe, this is just me, but I think the players, they should have a collective bargaining agreement, and that's in putting things in place and doing that. But it's like I said, I am just so glad that I'm out of it. I can sit back and I'll tell you, other than my son being involved and worried about, who he's working for. And then my daughter, she works for the Peach Bowl and everything else. Other than that, I don't watch really any college football at all, because I just don't like what it's turned into and what it's become. And,
Oh, I think we lost.
Decisions that could have rectified the situation back 5, 10 years ago, and given these kids stipends to alleviate the problems. Because like I said, everybody just wanted to pile on more, because the athletic departments, the universities, the conferences, they wanted more money because of the TV packages and all those sort of things. But guess what? They all forgot about the student athlete.
Yeah.
And now they have much bigger problems than they would have had if they would have just done it, 10 years ago.
If they gave a little, they wouldn't have a tsunami going on right now, essentially,
Exactly.
In essence. Before I let you go, Randy, here on Wake Up Call with Dan Tortora, inside of the Great Lakes Honda City Studios with longtime coach Randy Edsall, who is now a full-time golfer and enjoying better weather than me. Randy, you brought up lawsuit. Diego Pavia, who played at the New Mexico Military Institute, 2 years of junior college, he went on to New Mexico State, played 2 years there. Okay? In your brain and in my brain, that's 4 years of college football, so he's done. But he gets another year from Vanderbilt. So he's played 5 seasons of college football, 2 in junior college, 3 at the Division I-A FBS level. Now he is suing the NCAA, asking for at least 1 more year, if not 2. Now, his reasoning goes along the lines and specifically mentions Dillon Gabriel and the fact that guys like Dillon Gabriel, and I think he might have mentioned Quinn Ewers, but the fact that these guys have been starters, that they've started for they've not only been in the NCAA at Division I-A FBS, but they've been there for 5 years and they played. Now, granted, they had the COVID year. Junior colleges, some schools, some conferences didn't allow the COVID year. The Ivy League didn't have the COVID year. But he's saying, okay, well, they got not only 5 years instead of 4, but because you're supposed to get 5 years to play for, they got 5 years. They were starters. They were out there. They were doing their thing. They were playing. So his argument is, if they can do that, then I should be able to do that. Junior college should not count against my NCAA years. So essentially, it should be treated like a prep school. So you can play high school ball, then you can play a year or 2 at junior college, and then you get 4 years in the NCAA. Now, if they award him 2 years, then that's going to change the rule here. And I guess the argument with that is, well, then he should have a redshirt year as well. So if he's played 3 years in the NCAA, he needs 5 years to play 4. So they need to give him 2 more years so he could redshirt if he wants to. But if he doesn't redshirt, now he's playing 5 years instead of 4 years of eligibility, which is going to break the whole system open. Now redshirt. Now you can redshirt and play a 5th year. Now there's not going to be 4 years. There's going to be 5. If junior college doesn't count toward NCAA play, then you're going to have guys that can become career college students. And if they want to play college football, they can graduate high school at 18, be 19 years old, junior college year 1, 20 years old, junior college 2, and now by the time they graduate and try to go to the NFL, they're 25 years old. Maybe they're 26 years old if, God forbid, they go through an injury. So the Diego Pavia lawsuit is stating that it's affecting his monetary well-being. When I went back and I read through this and they talked about the well-being and they're talking about the student-athlete, it kept leading back, and I know you'll be surprised as I was, it kept leading back to money. So when we look back on the money side of it, and I'm going to read the quote from the actual lawsuit because I want to get your thoughts on this. It says, from the lawsuit, the verbiage is, despite what the NCAA may claim, the JUCO, which stands for junior college, eligibility limitation bylaws restrain college athletes from improving their economic opportunity, personal growth, and well-being with NIL opportunities through a full 4-year college playing experience, a freedom afforded to all athletes who enroll at NCAA Division I members as freshmen. but not to junior college football player transfers. The restriction violates the Sherman Act, which is a Sherman Antitrust Act, because it has direct anti-competitive effects that harm college football players and consumers of college football. So I guess we're talking about fans now. In essence, the JUCO eligibility limitation bylaws amount to no more than an agreement to limit the amount of time athletes may play Division I football because they have chosen to attend a non-NCAA institution prior to transferring to a Division I NCAA college. These same restrictions are not placed on athletes who choose to delay entry for a Division I NCAA college or to attend prep school, serve in the military, or even to compete professionally in another sport. So they are claiming that junior college should have nothing to do with eligibility, and you should have a clear path for a full 5 years to play 4, or maybe even 5 years to be in college football. Judge Campbell, who's overseeing this case, provided an injunction so that Diego Pavia can prepare for the season, seek NIL opportunities, and get this, even transfer from Vanderbilt. So Vanderbilt, if they're helping him with this in any way, shape, or form, he could turn around and say, screw you guys, go somewhere else during this injunction. But Judge Campbell has he has quoted and said that the NCAA, quote unquote, falls flat in their argument about this. We know the NCAA is notorious for losing lawsuits. The House versus the NCAA is going on right now. They couldn't stop NIL when California passed it as a state law. So I would love to get your thoughts on Diego Pavia and the slippery slope of, if I can go to junior college, spend 2 years, and then walk into college with experience at the collegiate level and act like I've never played a college down, and now I'm going to college almost 20 years old, and I have an entire eligibility to play.
Well, the NCAA basically is run by academicians. You have some full-time people there, but you have college presidents and people like that who have a full-time job running those, who are involved with making some of these rules and everything else. But for the NCAA not to go through their bylaws, and their each and every year to make sure that or have people to say, hey, these things could come up, and to not have the checks and balances in place to allow that to happen is incomprehensible to me, because, you have a rule book and it says that if you go to junior college, you have 2 years, that's 2 years of eligibility.
Yeah.
You have 3 to play 2 when you come back. And that's all part of it. Now, all of a sudden, that changes in the court system can come. So where's the NCAA doing their job? And, it's just like the COVID year. Some of these guys are getting 6 and 7 years, with the COVID year. I mean, it just, I don't agree with it, because, the rules were, in terms of junior college, that's what it was, because kids couldn't get into, they weren't eligible with some of the rules that they had before, that kids had to go to junior college to go there. And then, I don't know. It's just disappointing to me just to see this, because, and it's like you said, and I've said, the problem is it's all about the money.
Yeah.
How much money can I get now? And there's no regard for certain issues that can come up where, and like I said, hey, I'm for giving guys a stipend and all those sort of things and everything else. But to me, they should, with the way things are going now, they should unionize, get a collective bargaining agreement. And here's the thing, who's laughing at all this stuff? The NFL.
Yeah.
The NFL is just laughing at this because, you know what? They don't have like Major League Baseball with the minor leagues. If kids want to go and just play football or play baseball, they can do that coming out of high school. They can get drafted, but guess what? That's funded by somebody else other than the Major League Baseball. Well, the NFL doesn't have a minor league system. It's the colleges, and now the colleges don't know how handle these certain things. And now it's just created this big mess. And, you know, you're going to see lawsuits upon lawsuits upon lawsuits, you know, going forward, because you're going to have people out there who are going to want to represent, you know, the athletes, to say, well, we can get you this much more money, or we can get that. And then what you're going to do, you'll find a judge that will rule in your favor because they don't agree with the NCAA or whatever it may be. That's the world we live in.
Yeah. I mean, essentially, almost 7 years ago, I made the prediction that the NCAA would cease to exist, or if it did exist, it would exist vastly different than we recognized it before. Unfortunately, because of the NCAA, they have essentially worked to kill themselves and made my prediction correct, which I did not want my prediction to be correct. I wanted it to be a telltale stop where you are right now and stop going in the wrong direction, because what do they say? The farther you go in the wrong direction, the more it costs you to turn around and pay to come back. So, I mean, they're in a place right now which is very, very, they're in dire straits. Is there anything about college football, Randy, that you right now like? We've talked about the many, many problems that they have put themselves into. Do you like the 12-team CFP? Would you change anything about it? Are conference champions going to be the top four? Should it just be the four best teams? Did you like watching the CFP? Do you feel like we got the two best out of it? Like, as far as what positives you see, is there good in the CFP and in its expansion at this point?
Well, I think it's better than having four teams, you know, that I do agree with that. But again, until you get a fairer system in terms of people playing people during the season, I still think it's, you know, and again, I don't agree with, but, you know, again, and this is what's so arbitrary, Dan, is just, you know, you can say, okay, you don't take the four conference champions, but, you know, then how do you, you know, rate those other people, you know, those other teams, you know, in terms of, you know, who they might have played and everything else. And that's why I said, I think you got to change that to get a fairer system in terms of who's playing who to get that. Because like I said, you know, you just don't have a fair, equitable system in terms of who you're playing. Yeah. You know, and the schedule, because, you know, just use for the Big Ten, you know, say, you know, some team might not play Ohio State and Penn State and, you know, those teams where other teams are playing them, you know, and they have, you know, an easier schedule. And again, you're only going to have, there's only probably maybe 10 teams that even have a shot to win the national championship, you know, and that's why, you know, if you take it down a little bit and all that, but I don't know, if somebody, and this is what I said, if I had the chance to if, like I said, if my son or my daughter wasn't involved, but if somebody said, hey, you want to go to this game or whatever, and you know, I'd say, no, I'll watch it on TV. You know, if I want to watch it on TV, you know, I just don't like, and again, I just don't like what it stands for, you know, and I you know, I have had people call me and ask me for would I donate to the collectives, and I said, no way. I said, because I do not believe in paying players in college. You know, that money, if the universities, you're making all that money, then now if I want to go to a game, I'll go to a game. But to collect money and then to pay players to play at the college level, you know, that to me, you've gotten into this. The NFL, they pay their players. Those owners, the money they make, the TV money, it all comes from them. Okay, yeah, people go to the games and watch the games, but just to donate money to a cause to pay players, I mean, that's cheating. I mean, that's what it is. It's cheating for the most part, you know. And in the NFL, it's a business. Yeah. And now, if the college football, if you want to, because it's really not about the game anymore, it's become a business now. So if it's going to be about a business, then treat it like a business and run it like a business.
And stop asking the consumer to buy tickets and donate to the collective and buy merchandise.
Right.
You know, if I mean you're the school, you got the money, and if this house thing comes through and says you got to put $20 million to the side, and guess what? School, you got to figure that out. You got to dip into your endowments. You got to reach out to your alumni. You got to figure that out because punishing other people doesn't seem like the right thing to do.
Because like in the NFL, all that money for jersey sales and all that stuff, they get the clubs get the kickback, but then the clubs have to spend so much money. They have a salary cap. And then if you go over the salary cap, you got some issues, and so. I mean, that's what it's become. It's become professionalized, and if it's going to be professionalized, then treat it from a professional standpoint.
Then to spin it all the way back around, if we had the top four and who's going to rank those, like you said, in the College Football Playoff Committee then I can almost, in my opinion, I can't promise that this is a definite, but 99.9% of me is like it would be the SEC, the Big Ten, and Notre Dame. There's no one else that's going to be in that top four that's going to get a bye. Notre Dame right now can't get a bye, but they can be as high as 5. But if you went off the rankings this year, the Big Ten would have had 3 of the 4 byes in this thing going into the college football playoff, and they would have a huge chance to win the total thing. I mean, I love the expansion to 12. I would be okay if they expanded a little bit more, but they have to, if you're going to involve the schools that are not in the power conference, in the power conferences or the autonomous conferences, which I like to call them because that's the actual legislative term and the legal term. If you're not,
see, that's why I like the concept within these conferences of, either, get to 20 or get to 16 and divide it up into 4 divisions, in within that conference, play each team twice within your division, play a number of games, 3 more games, within there, and then, there or whatever, 2 games outside there, kind of like I said, the NFL model. And now, if you win your division, you get a chance to play for the conference championship, and so now you got a way to do it, as opposed, because we ran into we were going to a game or whatever, and we were in Atlanta. We ran into the CEO of the College Football Playoff Committee and his assistant. We were just talking, and this was with a couple of weeks left and all that stuff, and we got to just talking. I said, strength of schedule, and they brought up. I said, well, take Indiana and Penn State. They said, well, Indiana, and I said, well, who has Penn State played? They didn't have a very tough schedule, and it's no different, and so, until you do something like that, and to make it as equitable as you possibly can, where somebody earns the right by playing all the teams that they're supposed to play down the line, then I think you have a legitimate thing. Then guess what? You don't have to rank anybody.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? You've earned the right to be in there based on 12 games that you played. And the way it's set up now, it's a very flawed system, and you have to change it if you really want to get the best teams in there and do it from a fair and equitable standpoint.
Yeah. Or, in my opinion, just call it the SEC Big Ten Championship and let it be what it is. I mean, I love the experience of actually physically being there for history and being there for the first round, being at the Peach Bowl for the quarterfinal, being at the Cotton Bowl for the semi, and then being at the national championship to actually physically get to see what this thing looks like in action. And at the same time, I did question a lot of things. Indiana had 11 wins. They were all against unranked teams. Their only loss of the season was against Ohio State, and they got blown out. And there was a caption that was put on television before Ohio State played Indiana in the regular season that said, and it was regardless of score, it said, if Indiana loses to Ohio State, they have a 96% chance of getting in the college football playoff. I have never watched a stat before that said you have almost 100% chance of getting promoted for not doing well. And that's exactly.
Yeah, here's what I'll say to you though.
Yeah.
They played the schedule that they were dealt.
Right.
That's not Indiana's fault.
Right. It's not.
they played the schedule that they were dealt, and that's the problem that you have with the way that system is set up now, in my opinion. And until you change it and do it where it's something different, that's what you have. But it's just like SMU. SMU played the schedule that they had. Arizona State played the schedule that they had. That's and that's the flaw in the system. Until they change the system, you're always going to have those issues that are involved. Yeah. Until it happens where it's played. Like I said, the NFL's got it figured out. You got to win your division, to get in, and then they take a couple wild card teams. They play more games, but they do that. But if you win your division within then you're going to end up having 4 teams playing, which you should, playing for the conference championship, a semifinal, and then a final, and then you win. You've played enough to show that you deserve to be the representative to go into the national playoff, 14 playoff, for the college football playoff, so.
Yeah, or they could just take the NFL model that added an extra wild card team. And, I mean, you got to think about it. The NFL has 32 teams, and they break it down to 14, and 14 make it. Right now, the college football playoff has 12. If you want to act like the NFL, then you need a collective bargaining agreement. You need to unionize. You need to have parameters around free agency. You need to have parameters around money with a salary cap. You need to have a commissioner, and you need to have a clear path of how you get to year in and year out, no matter who's on your schedule, how you get into the postseason, because there's teams in the NFL that have 9 wins that are hosting 14-win teams because that team was in a division where there was a 15-win team. So Minnesota's got to play on the road when they should be a home team, and people say that's not fair, but that's how it's set up. That's the system. Detroit's got 15 wins. Minnesota's got 14 wins. Minnesota's going on the road, and that's just how it's got to be.
Minnesota had every opportunity to be able to win their division because they play each team home and away, And see, and this is the thing, is that the college football, if you take a look over the last few years now, they've copied so much from the NFL in terms of even now the rules, with the 2-minute warning, with the communication system and all these other things. So, you know what? The NFL's been doing this for years. They got it down, Let's get away from the hypocrisy of saying they're student athletes. I don't ever want to hear colleges call the kids student athletes anymore. That is such a joke. It's unbelievable. They're athletes. That's what they are. They're not student athletes because and this is the other thing, and I got to go. I know you got to go, but here's the thing. The thing that just really bothers me about this whole thing is, how can these kids continue to transfer from place to place and everything else? Where are the degree applicable credits that these kids get to go? They must accept every credit that the kid has in a prior school, because you used to have so many degree applicable credits to come in when you wanted to transfer. Everybody must be putting a lot of these kids in just general studies or whatever it may be, to get. I mean, that's the stuff that just blows. That's why I said, don't tell me about student athletes anymore. It's just athlete.
And what did Ryan Day say? And I was sitting in the press conference during the college football playoff, and I don't think he meant anything negative by it. He was just talking about it. They were talking to him about the college football playoff and the format, and he goes, well, these kids aren't going to class. I mean, he said it. He was like, "We're playing each week like the NFL. We're not going to class. Like we're on the road." So I mean, the reality of it all is, like you said, if it walks like a duck and it talks like a duck, if it's quacking like a duck right now, but this duck has no pond to swim in. There are no parameters. There is nothing there. And so, if we're going to talk about them being wild horses, then you got to figure out, are you going to put a fence around these horses, or are you just going to let them run around? Because being kind of like the NFL and kind of like old college football leaves them in this like purgatory that makes no sense. And it's going to blow up. It already has. But what I can say about all of this, Randy, is no matter what is going on with this, you may be seeing me very soon, because I predicted that Shad Khan was interviewing Trent Baalke while Trent Baalke was interviewing head coaches, even if Trent Baalke didn't know that. I said he doesn't know that his job is on the line, arguably, right now. He let Trent Baalke go shortly after I had said those things. He lets Trent Baalke go. As a junior in high school, they said you could do anything in Intro to Business. You can pick any topic. I picked general manager of the Jacksonville Jaguars. I got a good grade back then. I can't do any worse now. So Jacksonville, you're on the clock. You need to make a phone call.
well. Let me just say this. They go through that process of hiring a coach, and I know who Liam Cohen is, but I don't know him personally or anything like that. And I wish him the best and all those sort of things. But
yeah,
here's the thing. You have the guy set up for an interview. You let Doug Peterson go, and everybody knows Balky, kind of, probably had something to do with that, and all those sort of things. But anyhow, you don't realize that, you're not going to get a good coach to come here, that you kept Trent Baalke there with, his reputation. And then it finds out that Combs not going to go. So then he figures out, the general manager's problem. I got to let him go. So he lets him go. Then he brings Baalke in. And then he makes a comment after he hires him, well, we're not going to have a general manager until like the end of February, he was saying. What the heck is going on here? It's like, and then the general manager reports to Shad Khan. Tony Baselli's going to report to Shad Khan, and Liam Cohen's going to report to Shad Khan. So who's actually in charge then? The owner? Well, he's already proven he doesn't know. He's been through, 6 coaches and all this stuff in the little bit of time that he's been the owner. Yeah. It's almost comical to watch. It's crazy.
I'm going to ask you a question really quick here as we wrap up. How do you say Duval?
Duval.
Right, but if you're doing the chant, how do you say it? Like when you hear them say it, how do you say it?
I know. Liam Cohen, he screwed that thing up so bad. Well, first of all, I would never come into a press conference like that the first time and do what he did. Now, he's trying to, make a splash or whatever, but that was a bad deal, so.
Yeah.
But
it just felt more Willy Wonka to me.
Yeah.
Little different. If you're going to be the head coach and you're going to say it, and these people have been like literally clamoring for anything positive for a long time, just, and I don't think people should be focusing on this. I should be focusing on his coaching, but the Duval chant has become something, and they care about it. And then, people said to me, they're like, did you see it? And then I went and I watched it. And I just thought to myself, it's a reflection to me that I feel like the ownership of Jacksonville has absolutely no idea how to run an NFL team. And from the inside, I have seen how new people that weren't there before treat good people. And I'm a firm believer in this, Randy. If you have one bad egg in your organization of good eggs and you let that person be a representative of what your front door looks like, even if you have one bad egg, it's going to change your whole organization.
There's no question. No question.
So we're going to fix Jacksonville one way or another, even if it just means that we go to a game and we chant Duval the right way. Randy Edsall coming to us here on Wake Up Call with Dan Tortora inside of the Great Lakes Honda City Studios. My friend, I appreciate you tremendously, and I hope that hopefully you and I can get to spend some time the next time I come down to Florida. Maybe we can get some FaceTime. I don't know if we'll golf because you may judge me, but I'm really good at putting.
All right. Well, I enjoyed it and appreciate being on.
Absolutely. Talk to you soon.
All right, buddy.